Junk. Beep, beep. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this thing that we like to call Movie Mondays with Matt. Plus, I'm your host, whether you like it or not, Clark Kent, and this is my good buddy, Stephen Kaarbo. Yay! Hello, Stephen.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Anytime, anything for a good buddy who used to work with me at the Daily Planet. Anyway, so I was hoping that we'd have our good pal Superman here today. I can't find the guy. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on over there? Is that kryptonite? Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, look who it is. It's Superman. Yes. Now, I've made it. I heard with my super hearing that Clark Kent needed me here, and then Clark Kent had, he had some copies to make or something, So there he is. I heard you guys were like, you were doing your intro, so hey, beep, beep. This is the streaming show, and, today's episode is all about Supergirl. Yeah, Supergirl. We'll be talking all about the original Supergirl, the new Supergirl, and just the entire super universe. But let's give you a proper introduction, Mr. Stephen Kaarbo. Mr. Stephen Kaarbo is kind of sort of the king of all things nerddom in the area here, and runs the greatest con probably of all time, I would think, called Excalibur Con. So, good morning, Stephen. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back, and I'm excited to talk about Supergirl and all the other nerdy stuff that we have coming up.
And there's so much to talk about. So let's get right into the Superverse, shall we? Yes, let's get into the Superverse. So Superman's been around for an extremely long time, and his cousin Supergirl has been around for an amazingly long time as well, dating back to the 50s. I believe 1959 is when Kara, aka Supergirl, first came onto the scene in the comics. And then she didn't really have much of a presence. There was a little bit here and there, but not until the 1984 Supergirl movie did she finally get her time, and it was just her time. There was no sharing it with the Man of Steel. It was her own solo movie, 1984, just called Supergirl. And, it happened, and it's not great. It's not the greatest movie of all time, but it happened. My thoughts are that it was hard to watch. So what were your thoughts on the Supergirl movie from 1984?
Well, I think if you look at that 1984, that era around there, it was the era of let's just do this. We've learned some of this stuff with like special effects, and we're just going to go all out. And Supergirl, I think, was in that bulldozer of try out special effects and see what happens and just throw everything at it. There were some good parts to it. There were some, for the time, some effects that were pretty cool, like the flying, Kara as she's flying around, like that's cool. But then just the campy, corny stuff kind of goes beyond. Reminds me a little bit of the show back in the day, the Mystery Science Theater 3000, like great movies for that. Like you kind of laugh about it, have a good time, and then you can just move on. It doesn't necessarily need to be a bigger part of some canon or universe. It just is a campy romp, and that's about what it was.
I agree, and it was also it was a huge flop at the box office, and this would have been the end of the super universe at that point in time in the 80s, but they decided to make a Superman 4, and that kind of became the end of the whole thing at that time. I mean, and we'll get a little bit more into the Superverse a little bit later on into the episode. But the movie came out. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a dud, but one big takeaway for me was Helen Slater did an amazing job as Supergirl. As far as I'm concerned, like, she's my Supergirl. She's always the person I think of when I hear Supergirl. Hey, Supergirl! I think, oh, Helen Slater from the 80s movie. Like, she looks correct, She just has that same kind of stoic look that Christopher Reeve has, and the same piercing eyes, and, it works. I would buy it that they are relatives. So that movie came and went, and then we didn't see a lot of Supergirl anything for a while then. There was a little bit of animated stuff here and there, and that's kind of where her identity was for a while. But it wasn't until then, and I believe Smallville was the next time you actually see her again. Yeah, in 2007, yeah, like later on into one of the seasons, that she shows up as a character, and then hey, Supergirl has a new identity in the flesh again. And I didn't really watch Smallville much. Did you ever watch Smallville?
Not really. Here and there, maybe an episode here and there, but didn't really dive into that universe.
Kind of same. Like there's, I wanted to see more. Yeah, I care more about Superman after he's become Superman, not the like 8 or 9 seasons before he's Superman. So I never really got too much into the show, but it was a huge deal when it was happening. And it would be fun to, recap a few of those episodes. But yeah, she came out then in 2015. The actual Supergirl show came out, and that was part of the Arrowverse. I don't know, have you ever watched any of the Arrowverse shows at all?
Same thing, episodes here and there. I've watched some of it, but never like dove into it. I lean more movie than show.
Yeah, samesies. I watched a lot of The Flash when that was out, mainly because I was cast to play The Flash, and hey, there we go, right here. I had to make appearances as The Flash at different things, and I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about the character, so I started watching the show. That's kind of the incarnation that I was supposed to be, that particular Barry Allen. And then so that gets all tied up into the Arrowverse, and there's Green Arrow, and there's Supergirl, and then there's like Black Lightning, and all these shows, they overlapped in the CW, and so that was like, man, you'd need all kinds of time to watch every single one of those shows, and I didn't have all the time. I still haven't gotten all the way through The Flash, but it's a fun show. So she did a good job as Supergirl, and we're talking about Melissa Benoist took on that mantle. But then we really didn't see Supergirl again until just a couple of years ago in The Flash. Then she was back up on the big screen again, and she kind of comes in at the end, and there was a bigger plan for her. Did you happen to catch that performance or The Flash or anything?
The Flash was a flash in the pan. I saw it, really remember very little about it. It just kind of was there. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that really stuck out to me with The Flash was, just having Michael Keaton back as Batman. That was the big draw for me. And that was amazing to see him back in that role. And there was bigger plans for him as well, and bigger plans for Supergirl and this bigger extended universe. But then everything, as we know, got rebooted by James Gunn. And now it's, I don't know, the James Gunniverse or whatever you'd want to call it. They're just kind of officially calling it the DCU instead of the DCEU. Yeah, I'm fine with it so far. All 2 movies that have come out so far in the James Gunniverse, I'm fine with. Which brings us to today, which is now the brand new Supergirl 2026 adaptation. Although we did see her last year officially, like at the end, she shows up. Spoiler, if you haven't seen Superman from a year ago, Kara shows up briefly at the end and has a hilarious cameo that kind of sets up like, yep, she has her whole backstory that we're going to get into later, and later is now. Initial thoughts, Supergirl. What do you think?
Well, I like the casting. I think Millie Alcock plays a good Supergirl and has that edge. She has enough of the edge to her, but also has kind of the chops to play a dramatic version of her as well. I think the universe around her is really neat. It doesn't have to just be on Earth. It's out in the universe, and then we get to see one of my favorite DC characters. I know this is about Supergirl, but we get the introduction of Lobo finally on the big screen, and I think the casting there is fantastic. I mean, it's whether you like the character or not, the casting is ideal with Jason Momoa, and it's kind of interesting. Some of these actors who've played multiple comic characters in their universes, kind of like the Chris Evans thing, or like multiple characters, like now Momoa being Lobo, but I mean, he was great as Aquaman, but he's equally great as Lobo. And Lobo is one of those characters who just you're just drawn to naturally. He's just a great character. So having Millie Alcock and Jason Momoa there, I think is a great pairing.
I agree, and I think Jason Momoa was more born to play the Lobo role than Aquaman. Like when someone told me like, "Oh, they're gonna cast Aquaman," the last person I thought was Jason Momoa. But when they're like, "We're gonna finally bring Lobo to the big," Jason Momoa is the first thing everyone thought. Like that's just kind of him. And he fits the part well, and those were big crowd pleasing moments, I'd say, whenever he showed up. And so, yeah, I think he did a great job. As you were saying, Millie Alcock, like, I think she was the highlight for me of the whole movie. Not being too familiar with her work or seeing her in the Game of Thrones spinoff or anything, I was like, I'll bet you she'll be able to carry this movie because they must have a lot of faith in her to put her as the lead in a tentpole film. And yeah, she carries the film well. She's probably the best thing about it, I'd say. And story wise, it's fine. It's kind of your general superhero movie. It was enjoyable enough. I wouldn't say it's bad or anything. I know there's a lot of people online that are saying, "Oh, this movie is terrible and it's the worst," and they haven't even seen the movie. Go watch it before you have an opinion on something like that, I would say. Millie did a great job, and the movie's fine. I've seen far worse superhero movies. I've seen far worse superhero movies this year. And this one was fine. I'd definitely watch it again. But it's not my top 10 for the year. I'll say that. But it was good, and the fan experience was good. What were your takeaways from that night?
So yeah, we're lucky enough to partner with Marcus Duluth Theater again. The folks over there are wonderful. We love having an opportunity to hang out with the crowds that are passionate about the movies and come out to the theater to hang out. We were fortunate enough to have Superman himself there in the flesh. And Jesse Switters, local comic artist, he did an amazing design of Supergirl and Crypto that he was giving out to our guests that came by. Just the excitement for seeing one comic characters that we grew up on, and two movies in the theater. That combination, that experience, just kind of like warms my heart as kind of an old guy that saw movies in the theater, at the dollar theater, at the mall, kind of thing. Seeing people come out and see it in person. The folks that came and saw the movie, everybody came out with smiles on their faces. They were excited. I think most people, like you said, enjoyed Millie Alcock as Supergirl, enjoyed the Lobo parts, enjoyed just like a fun comic story. I think we've gotten to the point where everything needs to be end game, or everything needs to be this culmination thing. Well, if you read comics, those of us that were nerds back in the day and still are, not every comic book is this big culmination. Sometimes it's just a fun adventure, and you can't have the big culmination movies or comic runs without having the smaller adventures too. And I think Supergirl is an example of that world building and universe building that can just be its own adventure.
Joink. I agree with that. Yes, it's own thing, and that's one of the things I liked about this particular Supergirl movie. Is it's not Superman. You're not going to go and see a retread of the movie from last year. It's its own identity, as is she. She is so different from Superman. He stands for truth, justice, the American way, and her tagline is truth, justice, whatever. So that already tells you that they're kind of in their own little worlds. And yeah, it stands on its own as its own thing. It's very similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, I'd say. It has that definite James Gunny Guardians kind of feel, but it is its own thing, and it deserves to be judged in its own merits as well. So that was our Supergirl experience. Any final thoughts on Supergirl before we rank all of the Supergirls?
Just one other thing that was a neat experience. I can't remember if Superman was at the table at the time or not, but you mentioned the tagline, and one of the patrons at the movie theater had worked on that tagline, worked for the ad agency, and then when the tagline was put up, he's like, "I worked on that." Just kind of a really neat experience that he now lives in the area, and I'm sure we'll see more work by that gentleman again. But it was a neat connecting point of this is somebody directly connected with the marketing of this major motion picture. It was really neat to see.
Small world, too, to run into him. I wish I would have grabbed that gentleman's name. Well, it was such a quick fleeting. There were so many people coming and going and people excited about this thing or that thing that were happening. And it was a whirlwind of a day.
Well, if you're out there, email Superman.
Yeah, email Superman. Yeah, you'll find my contact info on here somewhere. Daily Planet. Send it out to the Daily Planet, yeah. Being that we're kind of recapping all things Supergirl, like I mentioned the five main on-screen Supergirls that we've had, who would you say is your Supergirl? Who do you think is the best depiction of the character?
I think I'd probably, whether the movie was good or not, probably have to go with the Helen Slater version. Like, again, you just look and yep, that's Supergirl. I know who that is. It resonates, and she just embodies the character.
I agree, and like even seeing Helen Slater and other stuff, I'm always like, well, that's Supergirl. I'll explain. Well, Supergirl is in it with whatever the movie is, and that's just always who it'll be to me. So yeah, she's my Supergirl, Helen Slater. But I love that now kids are going to grow up with Millie Alcock as that is their Supergirl. This is going to be the first time they've heard of this character, and the character really stands for something, and that's an important thing. So that is part one of our Supergirl episode so far. So we're going to toss to break real quick here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the extended Supergirl /man/ just all things super universe, and get into the future of things, and we'll dig a little bit more into Mr. Stephen Kaarbo and what makes him so super as well. So stick around, my friends. Don't go anywhere, please. We'll be right back for part two, and yeah, we'll be here. Stick around. Joink.